Hello, welcome to TheraSisters Podcast. It changed, but it's good. Hello. I'm Catherine Barton.
I'm Amy Ryan. Can you see me okay?
Yeah. So today, well, first of all, Amy, what's going on? How's your summer?
Summer's good. We're in my new space. It's done.
That's right. New space. You can see it. Yes.
Summer's good. It's hot.
Yeah, it's very hot here.
Yeah. Just learning to live with a tween.
That
just happened.
Still, maybe.
We'll see. And it's almost 11 o'clock. So.
Yeah.
How about you?
Good. The transition into summer was a little hard. I don't know why. It just felt different. Mm-hmm. But I feel like we're on a good groove now. Summer camps are going well and staying busy and all that.
Awesome. So yay.
Yeah. Good stuff. Ready to bring in our guest?
Yes. Our guest is Bill Leritz. He is the founder of Plural Health and Healthcare. You want to tell us more about?
Well, do you want to come on in and then we'll say a little bit more?
Come on in, Bill. Join us in our little corner.
Yay!
Our podcast corner.
I know, the poops.
I'm a pooper.
Yeah, now you are. He said, I've never sat on a poof, but I think I'm going to be okay with it.
I'm fine with poops.
Don't worry, we won't film you getting out of the poof, because that's the hard part.
Oh, please film me getting out of the poof. My daughter would love it.
Awesome. Yes. Good thing to be up for.
Yeah.
So the information that you shared is you got your master's degree in social work from SLU, St. Louis University.
Yep.
And you've been in mental health work.
You do yoga. That's
why
you're
look at
you.
You can take your shoes off too. If you want.
Yeah.
Get comfy. Yeah.
Sorry, I totally interrupted.
Oh,
please.
That's how this goes.
Okay. All right. I'm quiet. You go.
And you've been in healthcare for more than 25 years.
Yep, since 1999.
Yeah. And now you started your own business with the Plural Healthcare. So I guess just jumping in, tell us a little bit about what you're doing about Plural Healthcare.
Mm-hmm. And do you want me to give you a little background of myself?
Yeah,
okay?
That's a great idea.
Please do.
I was born and raised here in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm. What high school did you go to?
Oh, that's the question.
Here we go. The Smet Jesuit High School.
Okay. All right.
Oh,
what kind of judgments do you want to make?
Isn't that the point of the question?
Yes. Catherine went to high school in Illinois, so she
I get away from that.
Oh, gosh, we don't even know who you are.
Exactly. Great.
So, no, I grew up here in St. Louis. Went to University of Missouri-Columbia. Got my degree in psychology. Got a minor in sociology.
Okay.
And then I went to St. Louis University. Got my master's in social work. And then I graduated in 99. Went and worked at a community mental health center called Adaptive Missouri.
Okay.
Similar to Places for People in Independence Center in St. Louis.
Okay.
They're located off of Hampton and 44. I actually met my wife there.
Nice.
She was leaving to go work at BJC. I was taking over her caseload. So she trained me for 2 weeks.
Oh, fun.
And then I took over her caseload. And then she called me up a couple weeks later to say, hey, how are the clients doing? And I'm like, wait a second.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went out on a date. And then the rest is history in regards to that. So mental health has a wonderful place in my heart.
Yeah.
So I worked at Adaptive Missouri for 17 years.
Oh, wow.
I was the director for 14 years.
Okay.
We served about 500 or 600 clients that were low-income individuals with mental health issues and substance use issues. And then I worked for a psychiatrist for about 4 years. And when he retired, I started Plural Healthcare in 2021, February 1st of 2021.
Okay. Good job.
And so what we do there, we do intensive outpatient group therapy, and we also do individual therapy. The majority of what we do is intensive outpatient group therapy. And the individual therapy is with a Dr. Gary Becker. Dr. Gary Becker is a Vietnam vet. He's been a therapist here in St. Louis for 45 years. He works a lot with first responders, veterans. So it's very close to my heart working with first responders and veterans and that the trauma. And it's not just veterans and first responders. I feel trauma affects every aspect of society, unfortunately. But acknowledging that is important in order to help get to heal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I work with, so he sees people individually, and then we have two groups that I'm not sure, a lot of people don't understand what intensive outpatient programming is.
Yeah, I was going to say, give us a little info.
So there's kind of like a spectrum of mental health, like levels of care. And you have that, I see a therapist, I see a psychiatrist for medication management.
Yeah.
And then on the other extreme is like residential care.
Yes.
Where I go somewhere for 30, 45 days, whether it's for substance use or mental health.
And that would be considered maybe also inpatient?
Yes.
Or is that, okay.
No, very much so. Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be, on the other side of the spectrum, would be that residential
inpatient.
That could be inpatient
Okay.
type. And where we fall in with intensive outpatient programming is it's somebody who's really struggling, having an acute issue in life, whether it's a loss of a loved one, a divorce, or just a life change or past trauma that they haven't dealt with or worked through. And they need something more than a therapist or a psychiatrist, but they don't necessarily need to go inpatient.
Sure.
Whether it's acute inpatient, just going in for 96 hours or something like that, or residential a little further up. And it's my partner, Brian Cooper, likes to say it's a booster shot for mental health.
Yeah.
And so it's 9 hours a week. It's 3 3-hour sessions of group therapy.
Okay.
Again, the people we work with, so we are a mental health IOP. So there are substance use IOPs. There's multiple substance use IOPs, Sonnet Lake, Harris House. There's many of them out there. A lot of good programs.
Different.
It's just different. One is focused more on the substance use piece. The other, we're focused more on the mental health piece.
Okay.
And the mental health piece is the people who come to our services are people who are struggling with, again, some recent trauma, grief and loss, depression, anxiety. We find a lot of individuals who are struggling, like who are college age, university age, who are really struggling, just the stress of especially after COVID and the transition, the stress of it, the isolation of it, where people are just not feeling like they're themselves. They need something more. I love my therapist. My therapist does a great job. I have a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner. I'm getting the medications I need, but I just don't feel right. I need something more. And so the group,
booster shot.
Right, the booster shot for mental health. And so what we then focus on is it's 3 3-hour sessions a week, and we try to keep the groups of 8 people and less.
Okay.
And the reason for that is so much of the power of intensive outpatient group therapy, from my perspective at least, is that interaction with others. There's always a therapist, there's always a licensed professional in there who guides the process, develops the curriculum. A big part of it is people being able to say, I'm not alone. I'm struggling with this type of trauma. Now, it might not be the same trauma you're experiencing, or the depression you're experiencing, or the grief you're experiencing, but I'm not alone. People are experiencing similar things. And a big part of the group is understanding, that being able to relate to.
And part of it, maybe the experiences in life, the life experiences aren't the same, but maybe the symptoms or their emotional responses could be very similar.
Definitely.
And they can connect on that level. Yeah,
right.
For sure.
And so we have 2 groups right now. And we have found one group, we focus a lot on trauma. Unfortunately, like I said right before, trauma is very pervasive in our culture. So really focusing on trauma, we incorporate, cognitive behavioral therapy, aspects of dialectical behavioral therapy, internal family systems, a multitude of approaches.
Sure.
And it's about an 8-week program. So it's not meant to be something that's long-term. Again, back to the booster shot to mental health. It's meant to say, you need something right now that's intense, directed, 9 hours a week.
Right, it's a lot.
Again, 8 people or less, because that community aspect is very important. Again, not everybody's going to connect with everybody, but there needs to be some commonality. And part of the process is when we assess people, making sure, does this group make sense for you? This specific group or this group? Like, we're trying to create multiple groups to allow for, addressing as many issues as possible. But the reality is that a group therapy is only as good as the cohesiveness of that group.
Yeah.
So they're closed groups, so they stay, it's the same people for the whole 8 weeks?
It is not. No, it's people come in, so through that, so it's an open group. So that's a great question. And another thing that's great about that is, and a lot of it has to do with that intake process, assessing, what are your needs, where do you fit, do you not fit here, would it be better if you're in this group? This group has older individuals who are struggling with midlife issues. This group is struggling more with, whatever that may be. And you're not going to get the perfect fit, but trying to make sure. And one of the things, right now we have 2 groups. We're looking at expanding it, have multiple groups to, accommodate as many people as possible. And the reality of, as you guys know, you're both therapists, people only get out of it what they put in.
Right.
So it's very important.
With anything in life, right?
Yes, exactly. Anything in life is. If you're not, so we get a lot of parents of adult children saying, I really want my daughter, I really want my son to get into this service. And I'm like, that's wonderful, and I appreciate that, but do they want it?
Right.
And they need to be engaged. And one of the things that's important through the process when we do the initial assessment is, do we feel we can help you? And we don't always know that up front. But also, we don't want to set somebody up for failure. We don't want to say, unfortunately, sometimes in mental health, from my experiences, we can do anything. We can help anybody. That's not necessarily the case. And if we don't feel we can help you, we have a lot of resources out in the community to refer. Like, you have needs that we cannot assist with. And if we cannot assist with you, then we'd love to bring you in.
Sure.
But if we can't, we're setting you up for failure, and it's not fair to anybody involved.
Yes.
Especially, and our focus is the group dynamic, that milieu. Is so important to hold that, because it needs to be a very safe space. And even somebody who, that if they're not engaged, it's a lot harder for me to express my deepest concerns in a situation. Not even if they're being aggressive or, obstinate.
If they're not even interested.
If they're not interested, then what it creates is a situation of not trusting.
Right. And you can feel that.
Oh, you can
right?
feel that.
And if the other people aren't involved or even trusting to share too, like you said, if they're not super into it or like being authentic themselves, like you said, I'm not going to be authentic either.
Right,
and then we're all just kind of blocking, and then it's not helpful.
And that's the whole thing, is to bring down those walls.
Right. Yeah.
Or as much as we can. You can only go so far with the set. And the group lasts about 8 weeks. The curriculum is about 8 weeks. And we incorporate, again, like I mentioned, all different types of modality. Mindfulness is a very big part of it.
And it's open, so you can have people who might be close to the end of their 8 weeks, and then you have new people coming in. So you've got this maybe seasoned group member who can offer.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's a very good, very, from that perspective, I think that's very powerful, because you can have somebody that say, so I'm coming into group and I am scared. I've never sought this out before.
Yeah.
It's hard enough for me to admit I need the help. And now I've got to sit here with 6, 7, 8 people.
Strangers.
And then start talking about it. And if somebody can sit across the way and say, I came here 6 weeks ago and I felt the same way you're feeling.
Yeah.
And guess what has happened? This has helped me. This has helped me. These are the tools I've gathered. These are the tools I've gathered.
That's smart. Versus like 6 newbies, right? Everyone's like looking at each other.
Right.
Who's going to say something?
Who's going to say something?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
Right?
So, no, that's smart. Yeah.
But it also injects new, fresh perspectives as well. It's not just the fact that somebody who's already, kind of almost done with the program can impart their wisdom, so to speak. But it's somebody new coming in who just has a fresh idea that can spark that group.
Yeah, that's great.
I like it.
Yay.
So 2021, right, is when you started?
Yes, February of 2021.
Okay. And so you're more focused on the mental health.
Yes.
And so lately, has it been more focused in trauma, or is that your main goal, is to help people who've been traumatized?
No, there's just been more of what we have realized is the more we work with trauma is such a commonality. So one group might have a little more emphasis on the trauma.
Okay.
Whereas the other group, like we also work with like General Motors. We work a lot with General Motors and people line workers.
Okay.
And people who are just stressed out, burned out, not necessarily traumatized by anything, but very, trauma. I mean, just burned out, overwhelmed by life, and the work they do, family life, that's the other. Well, that could be very different than somebody who's, I'm at Wash U, I've had sexual trauma.
Yes.
And so it's that kind of, we focus a lot on trauma is a big focus, but it's not the only thing we focus on. We focus on, we want to make the spectrum as big as possible.
Right. Do you also, for people who might have certain diagnoses, is that also something that down the road you're thinking like a group for like people with bipolar or anything like that?
So right now, what we're not specific to like bipolar per se, but it's more of like if there's a lot of people who are struggling with sexual trauma. Like we have a group right now. It's only females, and the majority of the females have had some type of sexual trauma. It doesn't mean you have to have had that to get into our group, but that is a unique group.
Yes.
And that we're addressing. And we don't want somebody who's with the best intentions, a 35-year-old male is not going to create a safe space.
Right.
So then, but that 35-year-old male has a lot of needs. It's just a different type of need.
Yes.
And so we're trying to create that type of group. So we haven't pinned it down to like bipolar or like specific to anxiety or OCD or depression. But we're trying to make it like
so it's a little broader, but yet focused.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the one group we have right now is a little broader.
Okay.
And it encompasses more of the variety of, age levels and male, female. And the other group right now is more directed towards females.
Okay.
And sexual trauma.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
And not not specific to sexual trauma, but we have found.
Well, it sounds like you guys are really flexible.
Yeah.
As far as like what is the need that comes and goes.
Yes, and that comes from the assessment process.
Okay.
That's when somebody calls up, one of the things we really make clear right away is we want to help you. Like I said before, but if we can't help you, we're not going to tell you we can help you. Now, it might benefit us I'm a social worker by trade.
So you're just a helper.
Sometimes that's great, and sometimes that's problematic.
Yeah. Always trying to find the resources.
Right. Yeah. So it's it's like in talking with a therapist, it's like, okay, all right, we can't help everybody. I know.
But I want.
But and I appreciate that. No, and they're right, and they're exactly right in that. And saying you can help everybody, like I'm saying, it's not a good thing,
right?
If you really can't. So, but one of the things we do at Plural Health that's so important is finding other people, therapists, psychiatrists, support groups, different other IOPs, whether it's substance use or DBT, that's more like borderline personality disorder. A lot of personality disorders may not fit in some of our group dynamics because it's a very unique population to work with.
Yes.
And that can be problematic in a group at sometimes.
Sure. Yeah.
So just realizing we don't want to bring you, because the most important thing is, again, the group dynamic. Not that the individual is not important. The individual is very, very important. But it's very important to make sure the group feels safe, the group's cohesive as much as possible.
If there isn't a good fit, then it won't work.
Right.
Or it won't be as effective.
It won't be effective for the group.
Uncomfortable so.
And the reality is also, though, if we're not quite sure, we say, let's try it. Let's see if it works. Let's see if it works. And if it doesn't work, here's these other services we can refer to. So a big part of what we do is looking for other resources in the community. The reality is, in the field we're in, I almost think there's no competition because
we're all wanting to help each other.
There's so much need out there, and there's not enough resources. So I'd much rather get the right resources that we can refer to that can actually help you instead of just us saying we're the end all be all.
Yeah, we're going to take everyone and hoard them all.
It's not respectful.
Well, and there's so many different types of struggles that people have in their life. And Yeah, I do think it's important that we recognize, like, you know what, that isn't my forte, or I'm not really good at that.
Yes.
And so reach out to this person, because you also don't, I mean, you know, we don't want to give mental health services a bad name.
Right. Exactly.
You know, like, it didn't help me. Right.
But well, people are so hesitant to reach out to mental health services anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
Not as much as it used to be.
Yeah.
At all, but it still is. I mean, there's a lot of resistance. It's hard to ask for help, and it's hard to, especially when you're going to 9 hours of therapy a week, and it's just, number one, it's a time commitment, a financial commitment, but also you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you have,
and it's hard to be vulnerable 9 hours a week.
It is.
So then, while they're in your groups for that 8 weeks, if they don't have an individual therapist, is that where, is it Becker?
Dr. Gary Becker is one of our therapists.
Okay, does he?
He has the ability to see, but he focused just, it's just almost a parallel track at our agency. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't refer somebody to Dr. Becker. His focus is a lot on first responders, veterans. I've always wanted to create a first responders group, and it's been a very challenging thing because that's a population that doesn't reach very resistant, and it's unfortunate because I think first responders need more help than anybody I know right now in our population.
Constantly, every day that we're working, there's something.
And it's just hard. It's hard to be a police officer, a firefighter, an EMT, 911 dispatch, because you hear all this trauma and you're just so under the microscope. So not that we wouldn't refer to Dr. Becker. So I'm not going to say that. But one of the things, his forte is, and he used to run intensive outpatient group therapies.
Oh, okay.
So he's somewhat retired. So now he just does individual therapy. But that's one of the things, is finding therapists who we feel comfortable with. Another thing is, in this world, or at least in our community, is there's so many therapists. And I'm not saying that they don't all have their benefits and their upsides, but I don't want to give somebody a list of 150 therapists.
Right.
Because that's just overwhelming, and it's not helpful. It's not like when you call your insurance company, great, they have a list who's on the panel, but that doesn't give you any sense of quality or need.
Or personality, what their specialties are.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we really seek out therapists so we can create a very curated list of people we feel, whether it's couples therapy like you do, or just whatever that may be. But also, again, with trauma, like EMDR.
Yes.
And we have some EMDR therapists, some are a lot more, not harsh, but just
rigid
or just like, listen, you need to do this. And then other people are like, other people need a softer touch. So even within that, finding out what the nuance. So finding therapists. So if somebody comes into our services, they don't have a therapist, and especially if they're struggling with trauma, we want them to get a therapist right away.
Right. Yeah.
Like, we do not believe that it's a successful discharge from our program if somebody doesn't have an individual therapist.
So then in the side, while they're doing that, and if they don't have a therapist, you're over here looking like, who are my resources that I can refer them to? How can I help them get that?
While they're in the program, not even after, not even waiting till discharge, but
that's good.
Seeing it, because we consider ourselves a level.
Yes.
Yeah. And if somebody does have a therapist and does have a psychiatrist, we never interrupt it. We don't want to say, you need to change therapists, or you need to change it. If it's working for them, good.
Yeah.
We want that. We want, if they're comfortable with us communicating, we want to communicate.
That's a great support, because I know that throughout my time, I have had clients who have had moments of crisis that was a little bit more heightened, right? And they went into, a big hospital intensive outpatient program, and it wasn't as individualized, right? It wasn't as, they got benefits, but it was pretty much like each one that would come back, it was pretty much the same formula in a way. And it was helpful, but what I'm hearing from you is a lot more individualistic.
Very much
There is this more community, because I remember hearing like the age ranges and the things that people were dealing with were really different spectrum.
Right.
So it was hard for them to kind of open up really about themselves and their personal struggles and to be vulnerable. So what you're offering is really,
it's very
feeding
tailored.
a need that is missing in our communities.
And those hospital systems, I don't have anything. I don't have anything.
I'm just saying.
No, and I'm not. I don't take it that way.
Okay.
But yeah, but it's very important to individualize it as much as possible.
Yeah.
And to really meet the need of the individual when they arrive in our services. We're here to, our therapists will literally change programming halfway through the group because the group needs something different right now.
Sure.
There's three members who are really struggling with boundaries with a significant other for whatever that meant. This is an example. Well, okay. And they'll huddle up at halfway through. We always take a break and we'll come back and they'll change the whole approach.
Great. So how many therapists do you have working in a group?
We have two. They work individually.
Oh, okay.
But right now our groups are both at the same time.
Okay.
So they're they're Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m.
Okay.
And we used to do an evening group, and we're going to look at doing that again. But what we have found, the majority of people who come into our services either are taking a leave or would prefer, and if they are taking a leave of absence, which I recommend if you need this intense therapy, and it doesn't work for everybody. So it's not. But the last thing you want to do is, I'm taking a leave from work. I have young children. I've got to come to a 4:30 to 7:30 group right during dinner time.
Right.
If I'm already taking a leave, I'd much rather do it during the day.
Yeah.
And so it's very individualized. We also do work with a psychiatrist, Dr. Meredith Troop.
Okay.
She used to be the medical director of Places for People. She works at ARCA now and does a private practice. And then she collaborates with Connor Young, who's a nurse practitioner who I've known since, mid-2000s. She works at the VA.
Okay.
And she sees clients. So if somebody needs, not everybody needs medication management who comes in. A lot of times you'll need, you'll need a referral from a doctor for this higher level of care.
Okay.
And so we always offer that. If they have a psychiatrist, again, we don't want to interrupt that care at all. But if they don't, then while they're in the program, they see that psychiatrist or nurse practitioner, and they can...
Oh, so they need that maybe authorization for insurance or something of that nature? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Keep copying crawling. Kitty gets one.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So nice.
That's how you're looking for it.
I appreciate it.
So then what was it in your career that, it sounds like you've, stayed at places for a long time and you've worked and seen how groups can really be beneficial. But was there anything in particular where you're like, this is my calling or this is my focus to really, like to start Plural?
That's a good question.
Oh, thanks.
Actually, it was my boss says I'm retiring.
You're like, oh.
And I knew. But it's interesting because when I got into this field, again at Adaptive Missouri, it was very low income case management work, not a lot of group work. There's something called PSR, psychosocial rehabilitation centers, like clubhouses, like Independence Center has them. But the groups are more life skills type of thing, ADL type of thing. It's not something as intensive outpatient group therapy.
Yeah.
So it was somewhat new to me. And so when I went in 2016, when I left Adapt and went and worked for the psychiatrist, I was introduced I knew about intensive outpatient programming, but I didn't know a lot about it.
Sure.
So then I just saw how powerful it was. And my partner, Ryan Cooper, that's who I met at the time. And he was working with the outcomes. And, another thing we do, it's very important when people come into services, we do the PHQ-9, we do the Schwartz scale, we do the GAD-7, we do a lot of scales.
All
We do
these
the
assessments.
Columbia Suicide assessment because we want to show from an objective perspective how much we're affecting people's lives, not just from a subjective perspective.
Sure.
And we just realized,
which is powerful for the clients to be like, wow, this does work.
And people don't always see it.
Right.
They don't always see it. Yeah. And one of the things about our groups also is we bring in family members. Because once a month to have a family group, because a lot of times people are doing all this work and then either the spouse or the significant other or the family member may not notice it, or they do notice it, but they don't always communicate. It's just
they don't know how to go around
incorporate it.
Yes, thank you. That's
change even in a good way is change is difficult. Just realizing that. So when I was working for the psychiatrist, I just saw how powerful intensive outpatient group therapy was. So when he did say, I'm retiring, I looked at Dr. Gary Becker, who was then running our intensive outpatient program there. And he was also doing individual therapy. I said, would you be interested if I started a company in doing this? And he says, yes, I would.
Awesome.
And so we started that. And then... because
the psychiatrist was retiring, you're like, oh no, this is going away, this service.
Yes.
And there's somebody needs to...
Yes.
There is very few.
There's very few mental health. There's more coming in right now. There's definitely some more agencies that are coming on board for mental health, but IOP, but it's very rare, which is really unfortunate because I think it's so needed. So we developed this, and then my partner, Ryan Cooper, who used to work at Millennium Integrative Health with me, with the psychiatrist, then he says, I'm interested in getting back. And he's very good in business development and more of the business side of it. Yeah. Again, like I mentioned, I'm a social worker.
Yes, exactly.
For good or for bad.
Right.
But he brought a lot, but he also, having worked in the field, very well versed in mental health now as well. But we kind of joined forces, and then we started working. Our therapists are Emily Villarda and Hannah Baker Boyd. And they both used to work at DePaul. Okay. And I had worked with Emily because if Dr. Becker was out on vacation, she knew the psychiatrist we worked with. And so she would kind of sub in. Okay. And then we talked to her and she's like, would you be interested in making a change? And then she came on, and then she brought in Hannah. And Emily's just, she is, I've never met anybody who runs better groups than her. I know I'm biased, but she just does a fantastic. Well, it is a specialty. She's actually writing a book on intensive outpatient. Oh, good. Therapy. Yay, and she's just and they're so creative. They're so creative in how they, again, they on a dime, they'll change the curriculum. That's great. They're very well versed in this. Yeah. Yay. And tuned to it. Yes. Yeah. Nice. So from the psychiatrist working there kind of inspired you. Right. I just realized this service that was just, I knew it existed, but I didn't know, it wasn't pervasive at all. And I'm just like, this is a worthwhile thing. And it made sense. Yeah. Awesome. So we're looking at expanding that. Okay. Good. And then we're looking at doing other types of support groups. Like I'm working with another client, a lot of police officers that we work with. One is wanting to do a support group for other police officers. And I'm like, you can use our space. So it sounds like when you do these assessments, on some level, they are the inspiration of maybe an upcoming group. Yeah. And what's the need out there? To the credit of our therapists, Emily and Hannah, it's like, we realized we're turning people away because they had needs we couldn't meet and trauma based. Yeah. And we're like, and then Emily took a training on internal family systems. So wonderful. I don't know how well versed. I was not that well versed. I wasn't either, but wow, it's a wonderful approach. And we're like, why don't we expand our curriculum to really focus more on trauma? So that's an example. Awesome. Yeah. Instead of saying, if we... Instead of we can't do this, instead you're like, let's learn how. Yes. And realizing we don't know where to send you. Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Right. There really isn't. Yeah, not a lot. There's not a lot. It's very limited. So there is a need. Why don't you expand? So to your point, as we see what are the needs, we will continue to expand.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then
meeting the needs.
Yeah,
Yes.
meeting the needs. Yeah.
And then we take we take all most major commercial insurances. Unfortunately, we're not able to use Medicare and Medicaid because we're not affiliated with a hospital, which is a rule which I don't understand it.
Right.
Because I would love to do a group that worked with Medicare and Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
So we do all major insurances, and then we also do self-pay. And again, we are the type of, Ryan and I are just like, oh my God, sometimes are we good businessmen? I don't know, because we're like, we want to help people. So we really make it a point to say, we want to bring people, if you need us, we want to get you in here. Mm-hmm. We want to help you.
Yes. And so then do you offer grants, or do you find people to?
So we do sliding scale.
Okay.
So we do a self-pay, and then we do a sliding scale. A lot of times it comes down, we do not do grants because we're a for-profit. So we're not able to do grants. Well, there's grants out there, but that's not something, I mean, that's
not part of the business model.
No.
Okay.
But yeah, but we do work with people who do not, if they don't have, like we have a person right now who's just like, I can't afford this. And she came back in and she needs it. And not that we can accommodate everybody. Right. We're very honest with that. But another thing that's very important to us is when somebody comes in and we do the assessment, we tell people this is what you're going to owe. One of the things that is really I've struggled with and my partners struggle with is, why is it that you go buy a car and you know exactly what you're going to pay?
Right.
You go to a doctor, you don't know. A lot of times you have no idea what the out-of-pocket cost is. Yes.
Yeah.
And you just don't
until
know.
you get the bill. Right?
And then you get the bill. And you get the EOB. And
they changed that. There's that new, what is it called? It's a law. It's called something, right? I have it on my paperwork for people to read, where you're supposed to know, what the total bill
Sunshine
is.
Not Sunshine.
No.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I have it too, but
sorry, we don't know.
We don't know, but we can look it up. Well, and to continue just with our theme with our podcast too, I'm curious. We always ask about healing. Mm-hmm. We always ask our guests, how do you define healing? How do you define healing for yourself and for?
It's a good question. Healing is so important. I mean, to me, healing, like, I was very fortunate many, many, many years ago, back in about 2001. Well, first of all, just growing up. My parents, I grew up in the Catholic Church. I'm not necessarily a practicing Catholic at this point, but it gave me a lot of empathy and social justice to things. And my parents also loved to travel. So they were my dad's always like, and they loved to travel. My parents say they're frugal, they're cheap. But
because they have to pay for the next trip.
Right. But they always like, I'm not going to get you a bike, but I'll take you traveling, and we'll travel the world and the country, and we do it. We'll stay in hostels, youth hostels, and I learned quickly that human beings are so much more similar than they're not, and like seeing other cultures is just a wonderful thing in it. And I know that's not specific to healing, but it's specific to the fact of just the common human experience that we have. And so to me, healing is, it's kind of a cliche, the mind, body, spirit type of approach. Mm-hmm. And I think what we have lacking in our culture more than ever is that spirit, communal dimension of it, and realizing how much more people are similar than they are not. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we have such a disconnect, especially with social media. And just people, it's like we're connected more and we're less connected more.
Sure.
Yeah.
Than we've ever been.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense of your fit with the groups.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
That being such a huge healing piece. Yeah.
Right.
Your beliefs around that.
And so as I grew up, and then I went to, like I mentioned, I went to a Jesuit high school, and Jesuit, it's called Men for Others. It's all about service.
Oh, okay.
It's all about servicing other people. It's all about giving of yourself. Now, do most people who graduate from DeSmet do that? Unfortunately, no. And I'm not a saint. I'm not claiming that I'm this shining person or anything whatsoever. But I just think so much about, and then in 2001, I had met a gentleman. His name was Lama Lobsang Paul, and he was a Tibetan monk. And I got into Buddhism. I learned about yoga. I learned about breath work, meditation, and music. I mean, the incorporation of music into it. We've talked about music. I mean, just how important music is and how important. There's so many of these aspects of life that we don't incorporate enough for our healing. And a lot of it doesn't cost anything.
Yes, like listening to music or dancing. So what I'm kind of gathering is this one spiritual piece or connection with others, but maybe even a spiritual connection within ourselves, right? Like just this energy that we can create or bring into ourselves with like music or yoga or mindfulness and meditation, this kind of...
And most importantly, connection. Again, coming back to the group thing. In Buddhism, there's the three jewels, and they call it the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha.
I have heard those.
And the Buddha is the enlightened one. The Dharma is kind of the way in which to live your life, to be a fulfilled life. And the Sangha is the community.
Okay.
And the community, to me, like I have a group of friends. We meet every Friday or most Fridays and do yoga together at 6 o'clock in the morning.
So that's part of your healing.
It's a very big part of my healing. Okay. And I think that communal aspect is so missing in our world.
And doing things like that, kind of in a spiritual way together.
And when I say spiritual can be a loaded word. I don't mean religion. I don't mean nothing about organized religion. It's just the ineffable of our life. There's like music has an ethereal quality.
Yeah.
There's aspects of life that you can't just scientifically, chart.
And thank goodness.
Thank
goodness.
That's why I'm a social worker. My daughter says, "Hey, can you help me with math?" I go, "No, go early to school." No, we can't help you.
Right. But we know our strengths too.
Right, we know our strengths. So from a healing perspective, so through that, I learned, again, through yoga, through breath work, and that type of thing. I think breath work to me is one of the most important things to healing. And again, as Andrew Weil, I don't know if you know Andrew Weil, he had the big old white beard. He was a Harvard educated doctor, and he wrote a book all about breath work. And he says it's free.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You have all the tools.
You have all the tools, and he said people don't know how to breathe. And you don't know how to breathe deeply, and how it affects every aspect of your body. And activating the parasympathetic nervous system. Instead of the sympathetic, that fight or flight. And so all those aspects of life, I was, and then when I graduated from college, I moved down to Arizona for a year, and I was working as a Pizza Hut delivery guy, and I was working for a psychologist. And the psychologist, the assistant, she told me about a guy named Joseph Campbell. I don't know if you guys know who Joseph Campbell is, but he's a comparative mythologist. He was around from the early 1900s until 1986. He passed away. But he just taught all about, spirituality and about the commonality of humanity. Okay. He says most religions think they're different. Like almost every religion has the virgin myth, the flood myth, these myths, and about how it helps you, and how mythology, and not mythology in the sense of a falsehood. Unfortunately, people see mythology as a falsehood, but it's how
it's a story in a way.
Well, it's a story that's macro, and it describes, in every culture, it describes your kind of whole culture, and then it helps guide your community through your laws and how you approach life. But to me, most importantly, it helps the individual work through life experiences. And most cultures in the past had a time where, when you were 13 or 14, you had a transition from childhood to adult, and there was a ritual that meant something. Yeah. That actually resonated. And it's lost.
And some of that there's some cultures that still have that, thank goodness. But it is
it's usually thin now. And there's just individuals who are just lost because they don't have that grounding
Yes.
Well,
or
that
that transition,
and that
transitioning
acknowledgement
right.
of your transition that they can like be proud of, you know, or celebrate.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then, when I learned that back in 1996, when I was at the time, I'm like, whatever. I don't know. But then I started listening to him and learning about him, and they had a really good approach, and it really helped me. And it led me to, yoga, meditation, and just community, and to me, again, it's that community that's so important, and it's so lacking. Yes. Like situations like this.
Yes. Yay, community.
Yeah. But this is it's a wonderful way to commune. And I mean, you had mentioned when you kind of said, like, what's a glimmer?
Yeah. Well, what's a glimmer to you?
I'll tell you, a glimmer is how much hope I have in meeting people like you and meeting people just in our community who are really looking and seeking to help heal each other and themselves.
I like that. Where people can be glimmers.
Yes,
right?
and we're glimmers upon each other. Yeah. And the more you have glimmers, the brighter everything gets.
Yeah, I like that.
Oh,
good job, Bill.
Do I get a sticker?
Yeah. Well, that brought you to another big piece of our podcast, which is we always ask, what is a glimmer? Or what's a recent glimmer that you've noticed? And so that was
It's exciting, though, because it is. Because I think it's so easy with the news and social media. It's just so easy to see the negative.
See the glimmers, yes.
And not connect or reach out or find that community.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
I think it's not even there, maybe?
A lot of people don't know it's there. And that's one of the beauty of like Plural Healthcare, not to toot our own horn, but it's seeing that small little community of 8 people.
Yeah.
And go, guess what? I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I do have hope. I have the ability to affect change in my life. But not just in my own life, it's that whole idea of service.
Other people's life.
Yes. Now you have that baton. Now you're...
Yes.
One of the things about in Buddhism is when the Buddha found enlightenment, he says this can't be taught. And they said, no, you've got to go back into the world and teach it because you can't. And then he realized, no, you can.
Yes.
But you can't teach it in the sense that I can make you see enlightenment. I can give you the tools.
And
that's what therapy is to me.
Yes.
It's not saying, I got to guide you. I got to guide you to the solution. I need to give you the tools so you come to it on your own.
Yes.
Because that's where the power lies. Is when you come into it on your own, but also with that support and being challenged. The challenging part, a lot of times in our field, is being just kind and nice and just saying, "Oh, everything's gonna." No,
but
you got to
challenge
them. You got to challenge people and it's hard to really look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. I can be nice at the same time. Have you thought about this?
Right.
Did you notice this?
That's that challenge.
Yeah. Well, and the challenge here is we have so much to talk about. I feel like we could talk for a whole other hour, and I looked at the time, and I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
And we still want to draw our little question out of the bowl.
Oh, please.
So these obviously are all new. I've never even read
any of them. She doesn't even know
so
what they are.
You pick one, and then we all get to answer it.
Yeah, read it.
Wait,
I think it's just one. Yeah. So who knows what's in there?
Who knows?
What's your most prized possession and why?
Okay. Prized possession. Ooh, that's a tough one. Prized possession.
Let's go for it.
Well, I know. It's like, that's hard. I went straight to family, like as opposed to something that I hold or something physical. Not that being a possession,
right?
But
a possession.
Well, it's like something that. I know. Well, challenging you.
Challenging, yeah. Okay, thank you. That's a better. I like how you frame that.
Well, that's just where my mind went first because I wasn't thinking of something like that I would hold. Yes. But I was also thinking of the challenge of family too, in the sense of keeping up those relationships and the work that it takes and the community and communication that's needed for all of that. So maybe that's not a prized possession.
Sorry, family.
Sorry. I mean, I don't know. If you're looking for something else.
Stump the family.
Prized possession. Yeah. I mean, I guess I could say, if we're going to do like a tangible thing, I think if there's a fire, what would be some of the things that I would want to grab? See, I would grab my family. Well, besides the family, but if we're
You're
talking
doubling
about,
down. I like that.
but maybe like the two things that popped in my head were my wedding ring and then pictures, like photo albums. I think would be because I think what they represent, family is family.
Sure.
And the commitment I have with my husband and the love that we have, and then we have the memories and all of that. So that would be my possessions. Yeah. Now it's on you. Chris, did you really answer the question?
She did.
She didn't.
She did.
She evaded it.
Well, she
I'm still thinking.
what is my pride? I love books. I love books. To my wife's dismay. Not dismay. But I just have so many.
Do you have a
books.
lot of books?
I have got books. And I just love the look of
smell
books.
and
I love
smell.
the
Do you have a favorite book? I know. Okay. Well, give.
My favorite book of all time is East of Eden by John Steinbeck.
Okay.
It's by far my favorite book. Well, yeah, that's one. Yeah. There's another book called Shabu Me. It really had an effect on me, and it made me appreciate the whole Basque culture. It's a whole different.
Okay.
And I have a singing bowl that I've had for many years,
neat.
and it's got this. It resonates so beautifully, and I use it very often and almost every day. So whether it's at work or I try to meditate on a regular basis. So that singing bowl and this Lama Lop St. Paulton, I've mentioned that I've known since 2001. He blessed it. He was very much like, this is a very beautiful and spiritual thing. And it always resonates, but books probably. And I can't.
Would you grab them if there was a fire?
I couldn't grab them.
You grab each.
My wife would be throwing.
Yeah, right.
No, she loves reading. She loves reading. She just doesn't. I just love the idea of books. Even. The thing is, it's like that's my favorite book, but my copies not that.
Right. Well,
like I have gorgeous old books that I just love.
Yeah.
So they're more aesthetically, so than even the content. But probably books or something like that.
I like that. Are you going to answer or no?
Well, if you put it in the context of what would you grab if your house was on fire, I'm like.
So you leave your family.
Right. You leave your family.
Go on.
I can't think of anything in my house that I would be like, I have to grab. I don't know I know where some of my pictures would be, but I'd probably burn up trying to find them or get them. But I guess I was thinking maybe my car, because it takes me places, it takes care of me.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
It's something that I'm paying for myself. It's something,
empowering.
Gives me freedom. It gives me, I don't know. Does that count?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. It's not in my house, so I don't have to grab it.
You can drive your family around.
Yeah, exactly. My
away from the fire.
There. Yes. Yay. Okay. See, we incorporated it.
Oh, well, good.
This has been great.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
I know. I learned so much about you today, Bill, and I really appreciate you sharing all of it.
I'm happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Yes. Is there anything else you want to promote with, anything special happening up at Plural, or?
Nothing specific. I mean, again, we continue to develop our groups. We're going to continue to, we want to get the word out as much as possible because we want to help people. I also work for a place called the Kaufman Fund, or I volunteer at a place called the Kaufman Fund. And they work specifically with veterans. And so I'm part of the mental health collaborative. I've told you about this. So we're trying to expand services for veterans as well. That's not specific to my company. I mean, Plural Health, we're continuing to just push, we want to get the word out because people do not, I don't think people appreciate, I don't think they know about the service.
Sure. Right.
Even people in the field. And if you would have asked me before I went and worked for the Millennium Integrative Health after ADAPT, I'm like, I knew of it, but I didn't know much about it.
Right.
So I think it's one of the things is getting that word out that there's help.
Okay.
And again, my partners, or one of the things that I really like is, and I sent this to you guys, I think it was last night, with that video.
Oh, yeah,
and it really has a good description, and I think it captures and I think they did. I mean,
We'll
I wish I could take credit. This
we'll
is
make sure
Joshua
that
and Ryan,
linked
my partners who put this together, and I just think that really captures the spirit of what we're trying to do.
And it describes it really well in a very digestible way of like, oh, now I know what that means and what it actually looks like and what it offers.
Right.
So
no, it was good. Yeah, we'll add the link to that video.
Well, wonderful.
And so, real quick, where do they find you? Is it like pluralhealthcare.com?
So yeah, it's pluralhealthcare.com. And on there you can find everything about us.
Great.
And if somebody wants to refer somebody or refer themselves, they call the number, the 314-388-2225. It's on the website.
Okay.
And then what we do is if somebody calls, we do a very brief screening right off the bat. One of the things that we're very conscientious of is we don't want people to have to tell their story over and over and over. Especially if you're dealing with trauma. And just those traumatic situations. We don't have people keep telling their story. So we do a very brief, assessment to say, do we think we can help you? We check their insurance because one of the things we really want to make sure is it affordable. It's one thing to know this is going to help me, but if I can't afford it, then we don't want you to go down this path.
Sure.
And then
Waste time.
We get you in with a therapist to do the initial assessment right away. One of the things also about intensive outpatient programming is you usually needed it yesterday. You don't need it 6 months.
That's typical, I think, therapy.
Fair enough, but so we want to get people in as quickly as possible.
Okay,
so we make ourselves as accessible. Yes, very much so.
Awesome.
We can get people in within a couple days.
Oh, wow. Okay. Good to know. All right. Plural Health. Bill Leritz.
Yay! Thank you, Bill.
Yes,
it's
been great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Till next time.
Now we have to get out of the poof.
Yeah.
I can.
Oh, yeah. And we have to video it. Send it to your... All right.
We'll leave it to you, Bill.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
This can be the highlight.
What am I doing? Turning it
Nice. Yes.
Oh, sure. How do you do it?
I don't know.
I don't know.
It definitely